Welcome to Benno World.
It is great to be here.
I am so excited to dive into today's topic with you because, honestly, it challenges basically everything we are taught about modern work culture.
Oh, completely. It flips the entire paradigm on its head.
Exactly. So if you walked into almost any Fortune 500 human resources department right now and you ask them, hey, what is your absolute #1 goal regarding the workforce?
Right.
They would all give you some variation of the exact same answer. They want to eliminate employee stress.
Yep. They want zero stress.
Like they are building meditation rooms, they are instituting mandatory, no meeting Fridays.
Buying those enterprise subscriptions to mindfulness apps for everyone.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They are aggressively sanitizing the corporate environment of anything that remotely resembles pressure because the prevailing unquestioned wisdom right now is that stress is this toxic pathogen in the corporate bloodstream.
A virus.
Right, a virus that causes burnout, destroys creativity, and just fundamentally damages the bottom line.
We treat it like this invasive species that has to be eradicated at all costs. And, on a certain level, that instinct really does make sense.
Sure.
Because we have all witnessed the catastrophic damage of chronic burnout. I mean, when people are pushed past their limits for months on end, the physiological and psychological toll is devastating.
It's very real.
It's totally real. But the problem with this modern, highly sanitized approach to management is that it treats all stress as identical.
Right.
And it assumes the ideal state of human performance occurs at baseline 0. It basically assumes that if you are completely relaxed, like lying on a beach relaxed, you are operating at your absolute best.
Which brings us to the fundamental paradox we are exploring today in this deep dive. And it is a massive paradigm shift for you listening right now.
It really is.
What if the systematic eradication of stress is actually destroying your company's performance?
Yeah.
What if the goal for you, the high-performing professional, the executive, the founder, what if the goal isn't to minimize pressure, but to actively weaponize it?
Weaponize it. I love that phrasing.
Right. So we are pulling from this incredible extraction of a leadership text today, and it is centered entirely around a concept the author calls Principle 10, which is tune the engine, optimize stress for peak performance.
And the sources we are integrating here span just an enormous range of thought. We are looking at over a century of historical psychology.
Yeah, going way
back. And we are blending that with modern behavioral science. So we're including insights from Harvard Business School's Francesca Gino, for instance.
heavy hitter.
Definitely. And then applying all of it directly to the really pragmatic, high-stakes trenches of executive management.
So our mission today is to take you on a documentary-style journey into the actual architecture of pressure. We are going to dissect the surprising and honestly heavily debated biological link between stress and peak performance.
Highly debated.
Oh, majorly. We will explore the bizarre origins of a concept known as the Yerkes-Dodson Law. And ultimately, we want to hand you a strategic framework to calibrate pressure.
Right. And not just for your own nervous system, but for the complex web of individuals you manage and your entire organizational culture.
So we have to start by completely flipping that standard HR playbook we just talked about. The core thesis here is that performance does not exist on a downward slope where more stress automatically equals worse output.
Exactly. It operates on an inverted U-curve.
Yeah, let's visualize this.
Okay, so I want you to visualize a graph. On the horizontal axis at the bottom, you have stress.
Okay.
Starting at absolute 0 on the far left and moving to extreme, like life-threatening panic on the far right.
Got it.
And then on the vertical axis, you have performance, going from completely incompetent at the bottom to absolute peak excellence at the top.
So if you minimize stress to 0, basically putting yourself on the far left of that horizontal graph, your performance is actually terrible.
It's awful. You are not creative in that state. You are complacent.
Yeah.
You are not focused. You are just bored.
Right. To reach the peak of your capability, you literally have to climb the hill of stress.
You have to. As the pressure increases, your system wakes up. You become alert. Your processing speed literally increases.
And that is the essence of the executive's true job. It isn't stress elimination. It is stress optimization.
Yes. Tuning the engine.
Right. Finding that exact RPM where the engine of your team is humming at maximum efficiency. You don't want it idling at 0 in the driveway.
Yeah.
And you certainly don't want it redlining until the head gasket blows. You want the vehicle moving at the optimal speed for the terrain it's on.
Which brings us to the foundational concept anchoring all of this material today. The Yerkes-Dodson Law.
The big one.
The big one. It is the psychological model that maps this exact relationship we just visualized. As stress, or what clinical psychologists refer to as arousal, as that increases, motivation and cognitive alertness scale right along with it.
Up to a point.
Right, exactly. It is not infinite. You eventually hit a threshold.
The peak of that inverted U curve.
Yeah, the Goldilocks zone. Yeah.
It is that perfect state of being fully engaged and pushed, but not crushed. Because once you cross that threshold, if the environment just keeps piling on the pressure...
Performance doesn't just slowly decline.
No, it falls off a cliff.
It plummets. The system breaks down entirely and you choke.
And the author makes this brilliant connection here to the concept of flow state.
Oh, I love the flow state connection.
Right. Flow theory predicts that human engagement is maximized when a task isn't so easy that it induces apathy, and not so incredibly difficult that it induces despair.
Which maps beautifully onto the Yerkes-Dodson framework.
Ugh.
But, and this is crucial, here is the counterintuitive nuance that most managers completely fail to grasp.
What is it?
The peak of that inverted U, that Goldilocks zone, it is not stationary.
It moves.
It moves constantly. It is entirely task-specific. The amount of stress you can optimally handle depends violently on what kind of work you're actually trying to do.
And the text separates this out into simple tasks versus complex tasks. And the difference in how our biology handles those two categories is just staggering.
It really is. Yeah. So let's look at what constitutes a simple task. These are highly practiced, maybe physically demanding, or relatively straightforward operations.
Like sprinting to first base in a baseball game.
Yeah, sprinting, weightlifting, bricklaying, assembly line work, or even just filling out a really standardized form.
For those tasks, your optimal stress level is actually incredibly high.
Oh, massive. You can be screaming, vibrating with adrenaline, under immense external pressure, and you'll actually run faster or lift heavier.
The pressure helps. But the moment you switch to a cognitively demanding, complex task, the entire architecture of the curve changes.
The whole game changes. The text lists things like hitting a curveball, computer programming, strategic architecture, or, diffusing a literal bomb.
High stakes.
Right. And for those complex tasks, the amount of stress you can tolerate before your performance completely deteriorates is radically lower.
Radically lower. And this is where we start to see these really profound, almost contrarian insights emerge regarding motivation and leadership.
Totally.
Because a lot of modern management theory, particularly the highly popularized work of thinkers like Daniel Pink.
Yeah, Daniel Pink's work is everywhere.
It is. And it suggests that external pressure, extrinsic goals, aggressive scorekeeping, financial bonuses, that all of that actually crowds out and destroys intrinsic motivation.
Right. The prevailing thought is that if you want a software engineer to be creative, you have to remove all the deadlines. You just have to let them find their inner passion.
Just wander the campus and think.
Exactly.
But the author of our text today, who, we should remind you, manages hundreds of millions of dollars in assets in the real world, vehemently pushes back against that idea.
Oh, they push back hard. They argue that extrinsic pressure and scorekeeping do not automatically destroy intrinsic motivation.
Not at all.
In fact, if they're calibrated correctly, they coexist and reinforce each other. They actively keep the organization pushed up to the top of its Yerkes-Dodson curve.
And there is this great reference to Dr. Zimmett, a sports psychologist. He points out a massive hazard that the whole zero-stress movement just completely ignores.
The danger of being underwhelmed.
Yes. Being understressed doesn't lead to Zen-like creativity. It leads to laziness.
Profound complacency.
Right, a total loss of engagement. If the environment doesn't demand anything of you, your biology will happily conserve energy and give you absolutely nothing in return.
Which introduces what we can call three-dimensional management.
I like that term.
Right, because as an executive, you aren't just looking at one single curve, you are spinning plates. You have to manage stress across your own psyche first.
Which is hard enough.
Exactly. Then you have to manage the wildly different stress tolerances of every individual employee under your command.
Yeah.
And finally, you have to architect the overarching stress culture of the entire organization.
It is three-dimensional. And doing that requires understanding how the human brain actually processes information under duress, which is where the text brings in Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman's definitive work, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Such a classic.
When a manager cranks up the stress in a room, they are physically forcing their employees' brains to switch processing systems. They are actively triggering what Kahneman calls System 1.
Yes, and System 1 is our ancient, primitive, fight-or-flight hardware. It is fast, It's automatic, highly emotional, and completely subconscious.
If a bear walks into your campsite, System 1 takes over.
Right. You don't calculate the bear's velocity.
No, it just floods your body with adrenaline, dilates your pupils, redirects blood flow away from your digestive tract and into your major muscle groups, and you run.
It is an incredible survival mechanism,
It keeps you alive.
but it is absolutely disastrous for complex problem solving. When you need to write elegant code or design a 3-year strategic roadmap for your company, you desperately need System 2.
And System 2 is the slow track.
It is slow, deliberate, effortful, logical, and highly conscious.
But System 2 is a massive energy hog.
Massive. It requires calm, it requires glucose, and it fundamentally requires biological safety.
Okay, so we have this elegant, seemingly intuitive framework,
Very elegant.
but any bold framework attracts fire. And the text does not hide from the deep academic tension surrounding this entire concept.
No, not at all.
The Yerkes-Dodson Law is basically the center of a massive intellectual civil war.
It really is. I mean, we have serious academics like Carl Halvor Teigen who routinely dismiss the whole law as pure pop psychology,
Right.
pointing out that it has been clumsily applied to explain everything from memory retention to the effectiveness of physical punishment.
Which is wild.
And then we have critics like Martin Corbett who argue the YD law lacks any basis in empirical fact whatsoever.
None at all, according to him.
Right. He maintains a hardline stance that absolutely all stress is detrimental and must be systematically minimized.
So you have academics essentially calling this a myth, while highly successful executives and behavioral scientists are calling it the absolute secret to human performance.
It is quite the divide.
To understand how we arrived at this polarized point, and how a modern leader can actually wield this tool without just blowing up their company, we really need to understand where this concept came from.
Because it did not originate in a corporate boardroom.
No, or Harvard Management Seminar.
We have to travel back to the year 1908. We are moving away from the sanitized corporate wellness rooms and stepping right into the raw, slightly chaotic infancy of behavioral psychology.
Okay, picture this laboratory at the turn of the 20th century. You have two bespectacled researchers in heavy white coats, Robert M. Yerkes and John Dillingham Dodson.
Okay.
And their test subjects are not middle managers, they are Japanese dancing mice.
I know, it sounds like the punchline to an absurd joke. But this 1908 experiment is the literal bedrock of modern arousal psychology.
It's crazy.
And the context of the era is really important here. Psychology at the time was trying to legitimize itself as a hard science.
Right, moving away from Freud and the couch.
Exactly. They were moving away from pure philosophy and trying to measure behavior with physical, observable variables.
So Yerkes and Dodson build this small wooden maze equipped with an electrical apparatus.
As you do.
Right. And the setup is brutally simple. A mouse is placed in the maze and has to choose between two doors to exit, a white door and a black door.
Okay.
The white door is safe. If the mouse goes through the black door, it receives an electric shock.
And the goal of the researchers was just to see how quickly the mice would learn to exclusively choose that safe white door.
Right. So they manipulated two primary variables. First, the visual brightness of the doors, making the distinction easier or harder.
Okay.
And second, the intensity of the electric shock administered for the wrong choice.
So they were basically testing the exact relationship between punishment, stress, and the speed of habit formation.
And what they discovered is the genesis of that inverted U-curve. Initially, as they increased the voltage of the shock, as they literally cranked up the pain and the stress of making a mistake, the mice learned the maze faster.
The heightened threat forced their little nervous systems to pay attention.
Exactly. The stress genuinely improved their learning performance.
Which made sense at the time. The prevailing assumption was a linear one. If a little punishment makes them learn fast, a lot of punishment will make them learn instantly.
Seems logical.
But biology doesn't work on linear corporate spreadsheets.
No, it doesn't.
It works on thresholds.
And Yerkes and Dodson had a maximum voltage setting on their apparatus. They called it the 410 shock strength.
410.
Yeah. And when they hit the mice with this maximum level of stress, the entire learning model collapsed. The text actually notes that this extreme shock messed with the mice's heads.
Wow.
They became so overwhelmed by panic, so biologically hijacked by the threat, that they could no longer process the visual information of the doors.
Their performance didn't just slow down.
But it disintegrated.
And the researchers were fascinated by this. The highest stress didn't produce the highest learning. It produced total system failure. So their conclusion in that 1908 paper, fundamentally altered psychology. They wrote that an intermediate range of intensity of stimulation proved to be most favorable to the acquisition of a habit.
Intermediate.
Not zero stimulation and not maximum stimulation. Intermediate.
Okay, I have to pause here. I have to push back a little bit on behalf of the audience.
Please do.
Because I know any seasoned executive listening to this right now is feeling a very healthy amount of skepticism.
Understandably.
Let's really look at what we are doing here. We are talking about human leaders navigating global supply chain disruptions, managing complex interpersonal dynamics among highly educated knowledge workers, dealing with massive financial stakes.
Yeah.
And we are basing our stress management philosophy on electrocuted dancing mice from over 100 years ago. Like, how does a panicked rodent in a wooden box correlate in any meaningful way to a modern CEO?
No, that skepticism is entirely valid. And the author of the text openly acknowledges the sheer absurdity of this origin story. I mean, by the way, the specific breed of mice used Japanese dancing mice that were chosen because a hereditary inner ear defect caused them to literally spin in circles.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which made them highly active subjects. Yerkes is so obsessed with them, he actually wrote an entire book called The Dancing Mouse.
It is a profoundly weird foundation for corporate strategy. I'm just saying.
It is weird, I give you that. But you have to look past the wooden maze and focus on the underlying biology here.
Okay.
Yerkes and Dodson weren't just studying maze navigation. They had inadvertently stumbled onto the biological mechanism of arousal.
Arousal.
Arousal, in a physiological sense, is the state of the central nervous system being elevated. It is the release of cortisol and adrenaline. It is the heart pumping faster to deliver oxygen to the brain and muscles.
So what they proved is that a mammalian nervous system, whether it belongs to a spinning mouse or a Fortune 500 CEO, has a hardwired capacity limit.
Precisely. When the sensory input, whether that's the threat of a shock or the threat of a massive quarterly earnings miss when that exceeds the capacity limit, the advanced cognitive processing centers of the brain literally shut down.
They just power off.
Blood flow is restricted from the prefrontal cortex, which is the area responsible for complex decision-making, and it is routed straight to the amygdala, the primitive panic center.
So the CEO is not a mouse, obviously, but the CEO operates on the exact same underlying biological hardware and is subject to the exact same physiological bottleneck.
Exactly. And this biological reality is why behavioral scientists like Francesca Gino have really embraced the concept.
Right.
She actually published a compelling piece on this phenomena, and she admitted her own prior biases. She wrote, "I always assumed that if I could just reduce any stress I was facing, my productivity would rise."
Like everyone assumes.
Right. But she goes on, "But my intuition was in fact wrong. Research suggests that some stress can actually be beneficial to performance."
The text pulls a great quote from Tim Ferriss here, too, framing this realization. He says, "Embracing stress is like a superpower."
A superpower. And Gino echoes that sentiment, noting how liberating it is to realize you just don't have to fight your own biology.
Yeah, she says, now you can stop stressing about stressing.
Which is huge. The elevated heart rate before a big presentation isn't a sign that you are failing. It is literally a sign that your body is giving you the chemical resources you need to focus.
But wielding that superpower safely requires mastering what the text calls the complexity divide. We touched on this earlier, but we really need to dissect it deeply.
Yes, because this is where managers constantly destroy their own teams.
Constantly.
The Yerkes-Dodson Law is not a blanket policy. You cannot mandate, a level 7 stress environment across an entire company.
No, the peak of the curve shifts violently based on the cognitive load of the task.
So let's dive into the author's incredibly vivid musical analogy for this, because it bridges the gap between laboratory neuroscience and everyday experience perfectly.
I love this analogy.
It is the Metallica math test.
It's a brilliant way to illustrate cognitive bandwidth. Okay, I'm going to put you through.
Okay, I'm ready.
Imagine you are sitting in your office, totally normal day, and I wheel in a massive concert speaker.
Uh-oh.
And I crank up the song Master of Puppets by Metallica to an absolutely deafening volume.
Okay.
And while the heavy metal is blasting, I stand next to your desk and I aggressively poke you in the ribs with a stick.
Well, you have just created a high-stress, high-annoyance, high-arousal environment. The sensory input is completely overwhelming.
Exactly. Now, in the middle of this chaos, I lean in and ask you to calculate 2 plus 3.
I would instantly say 5. I mean, I might be annoyed, my heart rate might be elevated, but the task is so simple, it's so deeply ingrained in my neural pathways that the stress does not impede my execution.
You can do it on autopilot.
Yeah.
But if the Metallica keeps playing and the stick keeps poking you, and I suddenly ask you to mentally calculate 349 plus 11,134, what happens?
Complete cognitive collapse. My brain essentially freezes. I cannot hold the numbers in my working memory while simultaneously processing the deafening music and the physical threat of the stick.
Total system failure.
Right.
And here's the crucial insight the text points out about this. Optimal performance at a lower stress level doesn't mean the task itself is physically easier.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, mentally calculating large numbers doesn't require more physical calories or muscle strength than adding 2 plus 3.
Right, obvious.
It means the task requires vastly more concentration. It requires dedicated working memory.
And this is where we integrate Daniel Kahneman's psychological architecture again. To understand the Metallica math test, a leader really has to understand how the brain allocates its limited resources.
Which brings us back to System 1 and System 2.
Yes. System 1 is the fast track. It is automatic, frequent, emotional, stereotypic, and entirely subconscious. It requires almost zero effort.
So when you answer 2 plus 3, or when you dodge a rock thrown at your head, or even when you read the facial expression of an angry client, you are using System 1.
Exactly. It is designed to keep you alive and navigating the world with minimal energy expenditure.
And System 2 is the slow track. It is effortful, infrequent, logical, calculating, highly conscious.
When you are parsing a complex legal contract, debugging a convoluted piece of software, or calculating 349 plus 1,134, you have to boot up System 2.
Right. And the biological trap for leaders here is this. You cannot run both systems at maximum capacity simultaneously under severe stress.
You literally can't.
When a manager creates a high-pressure environment, when they start screaming about missing a deadline or implicitly threatening someone's job security, they are flooding the employee's brain with cortisol.
They are actively forcing the employee's biology to prioritize System 1, the survival mechanism.
The body literally thinks we are under attack. Stop thinking about the math problem, look for the exits.
Exactly. The physiological response diverts resources away from the prefrontal cortex where System 2 operates.
Wow.
So, if you are managing a team of structural engineers who are trying to solve a delicate design flaw, and you try to motivate them by creating a crisis environment, you are biologically sabotaging them.
You are blasting Metallica and poking them with a stick.
Yes. You have pushed them far past the peak of their inverted U for that specific complex task. Their performance plummets not because they are incompetent or lazy, but because you have completely miscalibrated the environmental stress.
This realization should completely change how a leader views employee failure. Like, are they failing because they lack the skill, or are they failing because the ambient stress of the organization is literally blocking their access to System 2?
That is the million-dollar question.
But this introduces another massive variable.
Okay.
We've established that the task dictates the optimal stress level.
Right.
But what about the human being performing the task? Because clearly not everyone reacts to heavy metal and a stick in the exact same way.
No, they don't. And this is the most complex layer of the entire framework. We have to move from task-specific curves to people-specific curves.
Okay.
Humans do not operate on a universal baseline. Our individual nervous systems have different default settings, different tolerances, and completely different biochemical rewards for pressure.
The text actually points out that people have completely different Yerkes-Dodson curves. The actual shapes of the curves vary.
Yes.
Some are steep, some are flat, some peak really early, some peak incredibly late.
The extreme examples make this really obvious, though leaders often forget to apply the logic when they're actually in the boardroom. Let's look at the extreme right side of the spectrum, the adrenaline junkies.
Ah, yes. The author gives a highly personal example here of his brother-in-law,
Right.
who is an expert rock climber, a mountain biker, and a kite surfer. And the author says when they go out mountain biking on standard easy trails, the brother-in-law is miserable.
Just bored out of his mind.
He gets bored, he loses focus, he actually gets sloppy. He is profoundly underwhelmed. To actually feel engaged, to wake his nervous system up, he has to be flying down a dangerous, highly technical trail where a single mistake means a broken collarbone.
Base jumpers, big wave surfers, tightrope walkers. These are individuals whose biological inverted U curve is shifted radically to the right.
Way to the right.
A low-stress environment literally feels like sensory deprivation to them. They need a massive influx of risk and pressure just to achieve baseline focus.
And the text brilliantly translates this physical trait directly into the corporate world by analyzing Elon Musk.
Musk is such a perfect example of this.
Musk is presented as the quintessential corporate adrenaline junkie. He does not thrive in stable, quiet, highly predictable environments.
No, he actively manufactures crisis to find his peak performance.
He sets almost impossible production goals. He takes his companies right to the absolute brink of bankruptcy.
He famously blows up multi-million-dollar rockets at SpaceX because he fundamentally believes the company learns and innovates faster under the extreme pressure of spectacular public failure.
Musk's optimal RPM is just staggering. If you took Elon Musk and placed him as a middle manager in a slow-moving bureaucratic utility company with no deadlines and no existential threats,
His performance would likely be terrible.
he would be a disaster.
You'd be sitting on the flat, far left side of his curve, completely disengaged.
Now, contrast that adrenaline-fueled profile with the other end of the spectrum. The text solemnly addresses the reality of clinical anxiety.
This is so important for leaders to understand.
For individuals dealing with severe anxiety disorders, their inverted U-curve peaks incredibly early, and the drop-off is practically a sheer cliff.
Their nervous systems can be triggered into full panic mode, a complete amygdala hijack with minimal or even zero external stimulus.
Right. Their own internal biology supplies more than enough stress on its own.
Exactly. Piling on external corporate pressure doesn't motivate them. It paralyzes them entirely.
And most of us sit somewhere in the middle, right? In what the author describes as a narrow band.
A narrow band, yes.
They use their own self-assessment as an example. On a stress scale of 1 to 10, the author knows they need to be at least at a 7.5 to perform optimally.
Okay.
If it's a 6, they are complacent, they're checking their phone, but their window of peak performance is incredibly narrow. It's just between 7.5 and 8.5.
The self-awareness there is key. The author notes that the absolute second they hit a 9 on that scale, they recognize they have crested the peak.
They can feel it.
They feel the cognitive slide beginning. And I have to take immediate corrective action, stepping away, breathing, delegating, just to bring the stress back down to an 8. Or their decision-making will absolutely suffer.
So let's put this into a real-world leadership scenario for the listeners.
Okay, let's do it.
Imagine you are managing a critical product launch division. On your team, you have an Elon Musk archetype, someone who needs a burning platform just to get out of bed in the morning. Sitting right next to them is a brilliant, highly introverted software architect who needs absolute quiet, total stability, and zero deadline pressure to access the System 2 thinking required to build your back-end infrastructure.
Wow. Oh.
How do you manage both of those people simultaneously without destroying one of them?
This is where management transcends a spreadsheet and becomes an incredibly nuanced art form.
It really is an art.
You cannot, under any circumstances, have a one-size-fits-all stress policy.
Yeah.
You have to become a student of the subjective, people-specific curves of your direct reports.
If you give the Musk archetype a long-term, methodical research project with no hard deliverables, they will quit out of boredom.
You have to feed them the crisis projects, the short-term turnarounds, the high-stakes pitches.
And conversely, if you drag your architect into the war room, surround them with screaming clients, and demand immediate innovation,
They will mentally shut down.
they'll freeze.
You have to act as a heat shield for them. You have to ruthlessly protect their environment, absorb the organizational stress yourself, and give them the calm space their biology demands to operate Kahneman's System 2.
You are individually tuning the engine of every single person on the team.
Yes.
It sounds incredibly elegant when we lay it out like this. It feels deeply intuitive, honestly.
Yes, makes sense.
But if this model is so practical, we really have to address the massive elephant in the room. Why is this theory so viciously attacked by the academic community?
Yes. The academic backlash.
The text features a fantastic anecdote that perfectly captures this intellectual civil war.
It is the cocktail party confrontation.
I love this story.
It highlights the profound friction between theoretical academic purity and the really messy pragmatism of executive leadership.
So the author describes being at a quantitative finance conference, and they're at the evening cocktail reception, an environment they admit they find completely excruciating as an introvert.
Oh, I've been there.
Right. They're just trying to survive the small talk.
And they run into an old friend and highly respected colleague, Dave Turkington.
Dave is a serious, heavyweight intellectual. He co-authored a book called Prediction Revisited, which deals with incredibly dense mathematical concepts.
Improving data analysis to predict the future, wrestling with randomness, quantifying uncertainty in global finance. Heavy stuff.
Dave is a guy who lives his entire life deep in System 2. He is a rigorous thinker. So the author mentions, kind of casually, hey, I'm working on a leadership book for a broader audience, branching out a bit from pure finance.
And Dave, without missing a beat, delivers this devastating offhand critique.
He says, yes, I've read some of your recent articles on LinkedIn. You've gotten into pop psychology.
Pop psychology, the ultimate academic insult.
The author actually notes, I could swear I saw a slight smile when he said pop psychology. It clearly bruised the author's ego.
I bet.
But it forces a necessary reckoning. The author is genuinely trying to present models objectively, actively trying to avoid the shallow, oversimplify, and repeat trap of the self-help industry. But they have to concede a really painful truth to the reader. The Yerkes-Dodson Law is widely considered pop psychology by the academic elite.
And this isn't just about snide comments over drinks. The text cites severe, published, peer-reviewed takedowns of the theory.
Real academic warfare.
Oh, yeah. We're looking at a 1994 paper by Carl Halvor Teigen from the University of Tromsø in Norway. It is a scathing, comprehensive attack titled Yerkes-Dodson, a law for all seasons.
So what is Teigen's primary critique?
His main critique is that the law has basically become a garbage can variable.
Like a garbage can variable.
Yeah. He points out that over the last century, psychologists have co-opted the YD curve to explain absolutely everything.
Like what?
Researchers have used this exact same curve to explain the effects of physical punishment, financial reward, internal motivation, basic drive, clinical anxiety, problem-solving speed, and even memory retention.
Oh, wow. So it's just applied to whatever fits.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Teigen finds it scientifically abhorrent that successive generations of psychologists cannot even agree on what the celebrated law actually states. To him, it is the ultimate insult to rigorous research. It's a chameleon theory that simply mirrors whatever concept happens to be fashionable in psychology at the time. It is too malleable to be scientifically valid.
And Teigen uses a fantastic, obscure word to describe this academic sin. He accuses the law of tergiversation.
Tergiversation, yes.
Which means the evasion of a clear-cut statement, flipping sides, changing the meaning to suit the argument.
It's a great word.
It really is. But the academic assault doesn't start with Teigen.
No. It gets worse.
The text brings in an even more aggressive critique from a 2015 article by Martin Corbett in the Journal of Managerial Psychology.
Corbett really goes for the throat.
He does. He states flatly that the YD law has no basis in empirical fact.
He essentially declares that the emperor has no clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And his ultimate conclusion is a direct existential challenge to the entire premise of our deep dive today.
Because Corbett argues that since the curve is an empirical myth, the old HR paradigm we discussed at the start is actually correct.
Right. He says all stress is inherently bad, and the only ethical and effective management strategy is to systematically minimize it. Full stop.
So we have a massive fundamental disagreement here. You have Corbett saying all stress is toxic, and you have our author, who is actively managing massive financial portfolios, saying stress is the absolute engine of performance.
It's a huge clash.
How does the author defend building a leadership philosophy on a model that academics call empirical nonsense?
This is where we witness the ultimate clash between the purity of the laboratory and the pragmatism of the boardroom. The author, writing from the trenches of executive leadership, vehemently rejects Corbett's view.
They push back hard.
They argue that Corbett's perspective is utterly simplistic and dangerously impractical because it's based not on complex data, but on observable human reality.
The pragmatic defense is actually incredibly compelling. They point back to Dr. Zimmett and the world of sports psychology.
Yes, the sports arena is the perfect testing ground for this.
It is empirically verifiable on thousands of courts and fields every single day that athletes perform better at optimal, elevated stress levels.
Think about a basketball player stepping to the free throw line for a game-deciding shot. If their nervous system is at a zero, if they have zero arousal, zero stress, they are essentially asleep.
They will miss.
They require that physiological elevation to lock their focus and execute.
Furthermore, the author appeals to universal professional experience. To quote the text directly, we all perform better when we get closer to a deadline, right?
It's so true.
If Corbett's theory that lower stress always equals better performance were actually true, then a company with absolutely zero deadlines, zero expectations, and zero pressure would naturally produce the highest quality and quantity of work.
And anyone who has ever managed human beings knows that is a fantasy.
Complete fantasy.
Without deadlines, people procrastinate. Parkinson's law takes over, work expands to fill the time allotted. Without pressure, engagement just evaporates.
So how does the author handle Tigan's accusation of tergiversation? The accusation that the law is just a fuzzy, shape-shifting metaphor.
The author actually embraces it.
Really?
Yeah. They concede that psychology is often soft and imprecise. They admit that the 1908 mouse experiment isn't a perfect one-to-one map for corporate finance.
Obviously not.
But they argue that the YD curve is an incredibly powerful, useful metaphor for understanding biological processes that are otherwise invisible and totally impossible to measure in real time.
And this is the crux of the executive mindset right here. An academic looks at a fuzzy metaphor and sees a failed hypothesis.
Right.
An executive looks at a fuzzy metaphor and sees a functional tool.
Exactly. It gives leaders a shared vocabulary, allows a manager to look at an underperforming employee and ask, are they on the left side of the curve just bored, or are they on the right side of the curve panicking?
The bottom line for the author is that regardless of academic squabbling, the concept actually works in practice.
Which naturally drives us into the final and really the most crucial phase of our analysis today, organizational architecture.
Yes, getting down to the tactics.
We've explored the biology, we've debated the theory, but how do we actually translate this fuzzy metaphor into hard structural reality?
How do you take the lessons of the dancing mice and use them to build a resilient, high-performing company?
We move from theory to tactical implementation. The most macro application of this concept is how a company designs its goal structure.
The author is responsible for a division overseeing hundreds of millions in assets. How do they calibrate the ambient pressure for hundreds of employees simultaneously?
They do it through the architecture of cascading goals.
Cascading goals. Walk us through that.
The fundamental strategy is to set organizational targets that are, quote, hard to reach, yet attainable.
Hard to reach, yet attainable.
That phrase is the literal translation of the top of the inverted U. If the goals are easy, the company sits on the left side of the curve in boredom. If the goals are impossible, the company slides down the right side into panic and burnout.
Setting that tension requires serious architecture. The text describes establishing broad, top-level goals for the entire division. These are the hard metrics covering investment performance and overall business growth.
Okay.
And for product development, they don't just say, innovate. They establish a concrete 3-year roadmap with highly specific launch dates for new products.
Those firm-wide goals then begin to cascade downward. The 3-year roadmap translates into annual team-level objectives.
Which then break down further.
Right. Those team objectives are then broken down into quarterly individual-level goals. The purpose of this massive cascade isn't to micromanage every minute of an employee's day.
No.
It is to architect meaning.
The text argues forcefully that professional meaning is derived when an individual can clearly see how their specific, localized stress contributes to a massive, overarching objective.
They feel like they are a load-bearing pillar in a much larger structure.
These cascading goals create the optimal environmental stress. They keep the entire organism of the company pushing toward the peak of its collective capability.
But this structural approach forces us to confront a major debate in modern management theory.
Let's play devil's advocate for a moment here. Let's bring Daniel Pink back into the room.
Okay, let's do it.
If I am an executive listening to this, and I've read Corbett claiming all stress is bad, and I've read Pink claiming that extrinsic goals like tying quarterly bonuses to these cascading targets destroy intrinsic creativity, shouldn't I dismantle this whole pressure system?
That's a fair question.
Right. If I want a highly creative R&D team, shouldn't I just tell them, hey, do your best, follow your passion, and just hand out participation trophies to remove the fear of failure?
The author attacks that exact notion with absolutely zero hesitation. If your sole objective is to create a stress-free environment, then sure, tell everyone to just do their best. Pink might argue that removing the pressure of performance metrics will let people discover their deep intrinsic motivation. But the author's response from the harsh reality of the market is incredibly blunt. They say, I don't think so.
We pay for performance, and we keep score.
Exactly. The text fundamentally rejects the binary idea that you must choose between extrinsic rewards and intrinsic drive.
The reality is that human motivation is pluralistic.
Yes. You can have an incredibly deep, intrinsic, almost artistic love for writing elegant software code. You can be deeply passionate about the problem you are solving.
Sure.
But you can also be highly motivated by the extrinsic pressure of a looming product launch deadline. and the promise of a massive performance bonus.
The two forces are not mutually exclusive, they are synergistic. The intrinsic motivation provides the quality and the care, while the extrinsic pressure provides the velocity and the focus.
As a leader, you must manipulate both levers to keep the organization hovering at the top of the curve.
So tactically, what are the actual rules of engagement for leaders managing teams day to day? How do you apply pressure without causing a system failure?
The rules map directly back to the complexity divide we discussed earlier with the Metallica analogy.
Rule 1.
Rule 1. For simple, repetitive, operational tasks, think of processing standard paperwork, executing a well-rehearsed logistics rollout or standard assembly. It is perfectly acceptable to crank up the pressure.
For those tasks, you can set highly aggressive deadlines. You can openly gamify the work. You can create a fast-paced, highly competitive environment.
Because the cognitive load of the task itself is low, the employees can absorb a massive amount of environmental stress and actually use it to push themselves into a flow state.
Rule 2.
Rule 2. For complex projects requiring deep Kahneman System 2, concentration architectural design, high-level strategic planning, complex coding, delicate negotiations, the rules completely reverse.
Completely flip.
The goals must still be ambitious, but the execution environment must be fiercely protected.
You do not walk into the R&D department on a Tuesday afternoon and scream, "Innovate faster!"
Please don't do that.
You do not impose arbitrary, artificial deadlines on problems that require deep puzzle solving. Doing so simply triggers a fight-or-flight response, locking them out of the exact cognitive tools they need to solve your problem.
Instead of pressure, you focus on providing autonomy, resources, and clear accountability.
And finally, the text offers a brilliant, highly tactical strategy, not just for managers, but for the individual contributor trying to survive inside a high-pressure system.
This is such a valuable takeaway.
It comes from a personal anecdote about the author's father.
The exam strategy. It perfectly encapsulates the concept of self-regulation.
The author recalls the brutal experience of studying for the Chartered Financial Analyst exams. These tests are notoriously difficult. They are pure, concentrated academic stress designed to break people.
When candidates get overly stressed during these exams, they experience the classic System 1 hijack.
They encounter a single question they don't instantly know, panic sets in, their heart rate spikes, they fixate on the impossible question, and they completely freeze.
They slide rapidly down the backside of the inverted U.
But the author's father, who was a veteran teacher, had a fascinating method for training his students. He would intentionally give them exams that contained far more questions than any human could possibly answer within the allotted time limit.
He wasn't actually testing their knowledge. He was testing their biological regulation.
Right.
He was training them to handle the visceral pressure of what he called the race for points.
To survive that race, you have to develop acute self-awareness. You have to recognize the exact physical sensation of sliding down the declining leg of the curve.
You have to notice your breathing getting shallow, your jaw clenching, your mind racing.
You have to recognize the panic, and then you have to actively intervene in your own biology.
The tactical advice is remarkably simple, but executing it requires immense discipline. Think about the moments you are called upon to perform at your absolute peak, a massive public presentation, a high-stakes salary negotiation, pitching a critical client.
You will be stressed. Your biology will be screaming at you.
But instead of letting the adrenaline hijack you, you take control. You take a deep, deliberate breath. You intentionally slow your heart rate.
You consciously shift yourself out of the frantic fight-or-flight panic of System 1, and you mentally place yourself at the exact optimal peak of your inverted U.
You don't eliminate the stress, you harness it. You tune the engine before you hit the gas.
It is the ultimate synthesis of biological awareness and professional execution, which brings us to the culmination of our journey today.
We have covered an immense landscape of human behavior.
We started with the deeply weird, controversial origins of the Yerkes-Dodson Law, the 1908 experiments on dancing mice that inadvertently mapped the biological limits of mammalian arousal.
We translated that raw biological limit into the modern workplace by dissecting the complexity divide. We learned that while your brain can handle blasting Metallica during simple addition, introducing high environmental stress during complex problem-solving actively blocks Kahneman's System 2 thinking, guaranteeing failure.
We navigated the extreme variances in human tolerance, recognizing the friction of managing an Elon Musk adrenaline junkie right next to an introverted architect who requires absolute stability.
We waded into the intellectual civil war, acknowledging that while academics like Tigan and Corbett will always attack the YD curve as mutable pop psychology or unempirical nonsense, its enduring value as an executive metaphor for calibrating organizational pressure is absolutely undeniable.
It is a tool that works in the messy reality of the market.
And finally, we explored how to architect that ambient pressure through hard but attainable cascading goals, proving that a leader can demand high performance, keep rigorous score, and maintain the intrinsic motivation of their team all at the exact same time.
The ultimate overarching lesson here is profound. Stress is not a pathogen. It is not a disease to be cured or eradicated from the corporate ecosystem.
It is the raw fuel in the engine of human capability.
As we close out this analysis, I want to leave you with a final, provocative reflection to carry back to your own organizations.
Think about your team right now. Think specifically about the individuals who might be underperforming, the ones who seem disconnected.
The standard modern HR instinct is to immediately assume they are suffering from burnout.
The instinct is to assume they are overwhelmed, that they need less stress, fewer deadlines, and more mental health days.
But I want you to look closely at the inverted U-curve we've drawn today. What if they aren't burnt out at all?
What if they are simply profoundly underwhelmed?
What if they are sitting flat on the far left side of the performance curve, suffering from a terminal lack of engagement, just waiting for you, their leader, to finally give them a goal that actually demands their peak performance?
What a powerful question to end on.
Thank you for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into the architecture of pressure. Keep tuning the engine. We are officially closing out Benno World for today. See you next time.